We are back. This is Todd Sylvester with the Todd Sylvester Inspires Belief Cast. Thank you once again for joining me and coming to listen to amazing people. And today's going to be no different. We have Carrie Wrigley joining us today. Thanks for being here, Carrie.
Oh, it's a delight. Thanks, Todd.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to give a shout out really quick to our sponsor, Veracity Networks. Thank you for believing in me and helping us get the word out of this Belief Cast. It's really been so helpful, and so many people have commented, and I do have to give Veracity Networks and my friend Drew Peterson a shout out, man. You're amazing, and thank you for believing in me. And you know, this wouldn't be possible either if it wasn't for amazing people coming to share their stories. And it's just when you think you can't get better, I mean, week after week, every time I get to sit down with people like Carrie, I feel so blessed to be able to be in a position like this. And Carrie and I have known each other for a long time now.
Yeah.
I mean, how many years it's been probably? I mean,
gosh, Steve and I were doing the math the other day. We were in the house that was across the street from you.
Yeah.
29 years ago, I think it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you moved in a little bit after we did, so
Yeah.
it's probably at least 27, 28 years we've known each other.
Yeah, that's a long time.
It is.
Well, here we are, and it's been a long time coming. We've been trying to get you onto this for a while, but I'm glad this is good timing because we just are following strong, and I'm grateful that a lot of people are going to hear your story today.
Fantastic.
So a little background on Carrie. I do have to say she's probably one of the most talented people I've ever met in my life, especially when it comes to music. And I'm not just saying this because you're sitting in front of me. I know you've heard this from other people, but she produces, creates music that will bring love and peace to your heart. I don't know how to explain it any other way. Every time I hear things that you've put together, it really, truly, it's like, wow. I mean, what a gift and what a talent. And I wish we had like a sample of it right now that we could share. But little background on Carrie. She's an LCSW, a counselor, speaker, public health educator. She's the author of a brand new book called Your Happiness Toolkit. It's 16 strategies for overcoming depression and building a joyful, fulfilling life. And, you know, she's a speaker. She speaks all over the place, all over the country, sharing a message of hope and healing and joy. She has a passion for helping people who struggle with depression, anxiety, and addiction, and other emotional health problems. And this is the part I really love. She believes that people can learn to do much more than simply manage symptoms. They can learn to actually heal from the inside out and then move on to a happier and more fulfilling life. And we're going to get into that in more detail. She owns her own private practice called Morning Light Counseling. She's been doing that for over 30 years. She earned her training up there at the University of Utah. She got a Bachelor in Fine Arts and Theater, and then later returning for the Master's in Social Work. And again, you know, she has many gifts, and you know, music. She's an actress. She's been in movies. I don't know, just it goes on and on and on. But she has websites and things like that I'm going to refer you to at the end. And then, you know, I can't wait for people to even reach out to you and who hear your story, who have been inspired by the things that you've said and the way you live your life. And again, I really am not doing it justice. You're one of the most talented people that I've ever met.
Thanks,
and
Tom.
I really mean that. So thank you for taking the time out of your busy day and schedule to come be with us here. We're live at Wasatch Recovery. I got to say that as well. And this is great to be here. So why don't we start with giving us a little background, Carrie, about your, you know, where you grew up and maybe a little bit about your family and childhood growing up.
Sure. I'm a Utah girl. I was born and raised here in Utah, mostly in the Sandy area.
Okay.
I'm the oldest of 7 children, in a really religious family.
Right.
And that's been a real core and anchor for me.
Yes.
In some cases, it's also, for me, as for many, been a source of a lot of pain when I've misunderstood, you know, the messages of my religion.
Yeah.
I think there's nothing more healing and helpful than spirituality used effectively, and there's almost nothing more toxic than when it's turned in a
you know, it's very well said.
direction.
I'm glad you point that out, because I think a lot of times when things are misinterpreted, and we do it as individuals, and we all do it, where it can create a lot of guilt and shame and heartache. And so I'm glad you kind of point that out. And disappointment.
You know, one of the topics that I've spoken on for years is a topic that was entitled Christ-Centered Healing from Depression. I sort of talk about, spirituality and other things that we can do from the inside with God's help to sort of move forward. But sometimes it's misunderstood, and I have people come into my office after they've heard my talk and they say, "Okay, Sister Wrigley, I'm ready for you to lay it on me. Just give me that Christ-centered healing." I'm like, that's not really how it works, because. And so that's a misconception. People say, I pray and pray and I hope and I hope and I read the scriptures and I do all this stuff that I know I'm supposed to do, and I'm still depressed, or I'm still anxious, or I'm still addicted, or I'm still whatever. I guess God doesn't care about me because he's not giving me that healing that I'm praying for. Not understanding that a healing process emotionally is just as gradual, just as incremental, just as much over the process of time with tender loving care as healing a physical wound.
Sure.
You can see, Todd, I have a little scar here on my knee.
Right.
Your audience, of course, can't see that. It's kind of a bugger.
Yeah.
About 4 years ago, you remember my son, Michael, who loves mountain biking.
Yeah.
And I was trying to be a good mommy and support him in his passion. And so I went out on the mountain biking trail with him. And let's just say he's a way better mountain biker than I am. And within the first 20 minutes, I fell hard on a rock and pretty much destroyed our experience and barely got back. It happened to me on the 4th of July. And so, Michael and the rest of the family went to the celebration.
Yeah.
As I was home with my leg in the sink, picking out the gravel and pieces of rock and going in with tweezers, it was terrible. It felt awful, And I still, as you see, have this little scar here to remind me of that process.
It's a good reminder, yeah.
And, it doesn't hurt anymore. It doesn't in any way get in my way. It's just kind of a sweet reminder at this point of this adventure with my son,
Yeah.
But I can tell you, it didn't heal right away. First I had to get the gravel and the debris out. I actually ended up scrubbing it with a steel brush because it went in so deep.
Ooh,
and it
wow.
was,
That's
it was
painful.
bloody. It was awful. It was horrible. And that was stage one. If I would have just ignored it and put bandages over it, so, well, okay, I'll just move on, it wouldn't have gotten healed.
Yeah.
As it was, it had to be cleaned out and it had to be, cleansed and I had to put, ointment on it, had to put bandaging on it, had to protect it, had to, there were processes involved, even in this dumb little wound. Obviously, there's people that get hurt a lot more than just a little, cut on the knee. The point is, it didn't all heal in one day. It took about 2 months. Just even for all of the scabbing to go away, and it took several months after that to kind of sort of get back to normal, and yet with emotional things, sometimes people I find have the expectation that once they decide they want to be healed, it should just be instant. That's not how it happens. Just like physical healing, there are steps involved, and the longer it took to develop the injury, the longer it usually takes to really get to the bottom of it, So you asked me about my background. As I said, I'm the oldest of 7 children. Yeah. And as such, I grew up kind of believing that whatever went wrong was my fault or my responsibility to fix.
So you kind of felt that way as being the oldest, like being the example to the youngest.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Being the example, being the second mother, especially with the youngest kids, because I understand now as the mother myself of 5 children, you just kind of run out of hands after a while, you know?
Yeah, right.
and especially when there's additional pregnancies or additional times of stress or whatever, so I ended up kind of being the kid whose job it was to make sure everything went okay. And in some ways, I think that's really served me because it's given me a spirit of service and helpfulness. But I realized over the course of my life that in some ways, that background of feeling responsible for everything, that it's my job to fix everything. Yeah. It's my job to make up for things, kind of put me in a position of what I might call being a success junkie or an achieveaholic. Sure, in a sense, that I sort of had to make up for things. It wasn't helped by the fact that my parents fought a lot. We understand this better now. Yeah. They're completely opposite from each other temperamentally, just very, very different people who saw things in very different ways. And one of my jobs, as it turned out, by the time I became a teenager, is being kind of a marriage counselor long before I was paid to be one. They would both come to me and sort of decompress after the fight and, oh, your father's so this and this. Oh, your mother just doesn't understand this. And again, as a kid, you can't fix your parents' marriage.
How young were you when you can remember when they started doing that with you?
Oh, probably 12, 13.
Wow. That's probably felt very challenging as a 12-year-old, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I think it kind of, in many ways, set me up to have to be, the kid that never struggled, to be the kid that got the straight A's, to be the kid that got the lead in the school play, the kid that, and it started to be, if I wasn't achieving at a really, really high level all the time, I felt like a failure, or I felt like I was a sad little disappointing shell of my past self, of my potential. And so it set me up for what I would characterize as kind of a treadmill of worth. I'm running and running and running. Okay, I'm doing this. Okay, I'm still worthwhile. Okay, I'm still okay. Okay, I'm still making things okay in my family. Oh, but now I got an A-. Oh no, now I don't matter anymore. And now and just no matter how many successes I experience, it never feels like enough. And even if I'm succeeding today, I worry that I won't have those opportunities to succeed tomorrow. I think I was in my 30s by the time I finally figured that out.
Yeah.
And as you said, I do a lot of things. I love doing things. I love writing and counseling and music and acting and a lot of things like that.
Yeah.
But it's been really fun the last few years to do those things for fun because I enjoy it, because I love it, rather than to make sure I feel worthwhile enough, to come out of love and service rather than out of anxiety and fear and self-doubt.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of our listeners can relate with exactly what you're saying. It's almost like if I do this, then I'm going to be happy.
Yeah.
And then we go do that, and then we're like, I still feel the same.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't I feel fulfilled?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and then I'll go do this now,
mm-hmm.
and I'll do this, And I think a lot of us get caught on that treadmill. That was a really good way that you said that.
Yeah, treadmill of worth. I really think we set ourselves and our kids up in our school systems, in a lot of the other systems, measuring them against each other for various things, and measuring ourselves against various things, and some of the expectations we have in our culture of the 80-hour work week, and just constantly having to produce, to achieve, to be better than, to make more this year than we did last year, to constantly have that bottom line growing up and up, and I really think it just sets us up for a lot of the depression, anxiety, and yes, ultimately addiction that a lot of times we'll turn to deal with the stress of all of that.
Yeah. Wow. Do you see that a lot with your clients in your private practice that you do? Is that a lot of the common themes that you're seeing when you meet with clients?
I think it is. I think it's partly what people experience themselves, and it's partly, I think, some of the fallout that comes from having parents that are so busy climbing the ladder or doing that treadmill of worth thing that there's not a whole lot left over for the kids, that in many cases are kind of left to fend for themselves.
Yeah.
And just kind of the sense of deprivation in all of that. It was really sad to me to hear, within the wake of current events, that a large percentage of kids, as school begins again, will be basically home doing school by themselves at home because parents are having to work. I can't even imagine doing that as a kid. The level of pressure, the level of temptation, really, that's involved in that, and just the level of loneliness associated with that. So there are so many things that feed those problems: depression, anxiety, addiction. That it's the one I mentioned is one of many, but I think sometimes we assume that those problems are just kind of, randomly, chemically generated, and that there's no real reasons behind them. I've never found that to be the case. Always, there's trigger experience. There's situations of hurt. And right now, with the situation that we're going through with COVID-19 and the many fallout, implications that's come from that, the loss of jobs, the closure of schools, the closure of theaters and sports events and activities that we've loved, the loss of so many things has been a massive, I think the real pandemic, there's a few of us that have gotten sick with the actual virus, but I think all of us, without exception, of every age and every, gender and description, are struggling with that impact of so many losses, so many changes all at the same time.
Absolutely.
And so, depression, suicidality, addiction are going through the roof right now,
Yeah, well, it's like all those things that you just mentioned that we love doing. It's kind of like our outlet. It was kind of like our release. Like, hey, I've had a busy week. Let's go see a movie. Let's go to that sporting event. Oh, we can't do that now either.
Right.
Now what do we do?
Or even as far as school itself. I'm dropping off my youngest child back to college, and he said from the very beginning of this whole thing, he says, "Mom, what's happened with school?" And I think this is really insightful. What's happened to school is all of the fun, rewarding, regenerating things are gone. the socialization,
Yeah,
the
right.
the arts, physical
Yeah.
education, all of that,
Wow.
and all the boring stuff is still very much there, And I think
I
that,
know. Right.
I think that's true of school. I think it's true of so much of our lives,
Sure.
and I think it becomes even more important as a result that we know how to keep ourselves and our loved ones afloat emotionally, that we know what is within our own power that we can continue to do to stay happy, to stay emotionally well, to stay, resilient and able to deal with the many stresses that we're facing.
Yeah. I hear that a lot too with these kids. Like, even kids are like going, no, I want to go to school now.
Yeah.
Like, they're like, man, I'm missing it.
Uh-huh.
And I think it goes along with what you just said. I think most kids feeling like, man, I'm feeling kind of down and low. And I think part of it's because I haven't been able to socialize and be around my peers and that kind of thing.
Especially for the teenagers. That's such a crucial part of development.
Yeah.
And so the distancing, I think we've all felt it, but I think, our teenagers feel it the most keenly, because for them, it literally is a crucial developmental step to form those peer relationships and to disconnect from families and connect with their peers preparatory to their launch as young adults. I've watched all my kids go. My kids are 19, actually Joe's now 20 through 29. And so it's literally been in the last 10 years that they've all, one after another, kind of attached those friend groups, found themselves, identified themselves in something beyond just only our family, and found their way, with their own marriages and their own careers and educations and so on, found their way in the world, And I really worry about the long-term impact of kids that aren't able to do that because, they're quarantined for month after month after month. Yeah.
Well, I definitely want to continue talking more about what you do as a counselor and a therapist and all that. But I also want to go back to, because you obviously are very talented with music. And I want to just maybe let our listeners know, where did the passion for music start for you? And kind of just take us through that little journey that you've had with music.
Sure. Okay. Well, like I say, I was the oldest of my parents' 7 children. And as the oldest, I got more focused time and attention, I think, than any of the others. And part of that, happily, was my mom taught me how to play the piano, starting when I was 3 years old. So by the time I was
Did you guys hear that? 3.
So by the time I was 5 years old, I was the accompanist in my kindergarten class, and I was making up little songs and stuff like that.
If people who know you would not even be surprised what you just said. But that's amazing. I mean, I'd be doing it that young.
Yeah. So it really has just been a joy and a passion for my whole life. But it was kind of funny because my mom basically taught me out of the old, Thompson and Shaw, is that what it is? Sham methods. As she was being taught by a teacher, she would come home and teach me.
Oh, wow.
And of course, she was following a teacher, so the teacher would assign her specific songs to do, and so mom would just, as a kind of pass it on sort of teacher, would assign me little specific songs to do, and I would learn them, but I would think it was so dang boring, and so what I wanted to do was what I, even as a little child, called compose. And so finally, mom figured out a very brilliant plan, which was she would, quote, make me practice for a half hour, set the timer.
Right.
And then I would, quote, be allowed to, quote, compose for a half hour when I would just kind of improvise on the piano and make up little songs and stuff like that. By the time I got to 4th or 5th grade, I got totally bored with that. It's like, I don't want to continue to play all this boring stuff everybody else wrote. I want to do my own music. So I basically completely dropped out of piano at that point. But my mom had another brilliant insight. And going into 6th grade, she gave me for Christmas one year a guitar and sent me to guitar class, just a little cheap little community education class, just as I was, about 12, wanting to kind of strike out beyond the homes we've been talking about and stuff. And I learned about chords, and I learned about, basic music theory and different things, which gave me even more tools for being able to sort of come up with my own ideas and figure out how to play them on the guitar. And I did that, very, very steadily for 2 or 3 years, and made up more of my own songs and figured out how to play, guitar tunes from my favorite artists and stuff.
Yeah.
And then about high school, I got a church responsibility to play just little easy songs in a children's group.
Yeah.
And that kind of got me back into piano. And then I finally realized all that great stuff I learned about, chord structure and music theory from guitar, I could apply to the piano, except it was even easier because you've got, all the octaves laid out and stuff like that. So I returned to, piano being my major instrument, and I started singing more and more and started making it more and more of my own stuff. And as I moved into college, I part of my theater training was in musical theater, and so I took some more music theory classes there.
Yeah.
And that was a really, really hard season for me for lots of reasons. And I experienced the first of what I would call literally a major depressive episode at that point in time. I mean, to the extent it was hard to get up in the morning, I'd cry all the time. I thought I was worthless, all this kind. There's a lot of reasons for that. But music for me during that period of my life was absolutely life-sustaining.
Yeah.
You know, I would sit, alone in some of the many practice rooms in the music building or in the theater building, and late at night after everybody was gone, just sit and play. Not play things out from a page, but just play things from my heart. Just pour all of my pain out on those keys.
Yeah.
And it literally is a lot of what got me through that really hard time, to have that artistic mode of expression.
Were you composing at that time too?
Oh, no. I was just playing. I was just basically improvising,
Gotcha.
Just playing my feelings, basically, just letting it, just come out. And then later it was in a religious context when I served a mission for my church. That gift for creating music started to kind of formalize a little bit more. I'd started to create songs, first in Spanish. I was in Argentina.
Oh, okay.
Because in Spanish, everything rhymes, because all of the verbs rhyme, right? So it was actually, weirdly, it was easier to start writing songs in Spanish than in English. So I did that for, about a year, and then gradually, in the latter part of my mission, started writing in English, and been kind of writing ever since. And it started with just individual songs, and then it started to become sort of cycles of songs that I could use, in a particular theme for various talks or various, community events or different things. And ultimately it ended up just in the last few years growing into doing full musicals, like a 2-hour musical we did with a church group a couple years ago that was, the most demanding and delicious and wonderful thing I've ever done musically.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
what a task to take on, right?
It was a task, but it was absolutely delightful.
Yeah. Well, that's when you're in your wheelhouse. I've seen you do that for years at church and other things, and I know you just thrive on that, and you're passionate about it. And you said something, when you were really going through that really depressive time in your life, that playing the piano in those moments was like your godsend, kind of your life-saving thing. And how that was going to be my next question, is how does music help those who are struggling, whether you play or not? How does music play a part in maybe when you're going through, depression or anxiety and things like that? How would you?
Well, and I'll expand it beyond just music to all of the arts, because I think what I'm going to say about music can also apply to, to drawing, to painting, to dancing, to whatever, I think, first of all, as it was for me, there's just that expressive element, whatever pain is on the inside needs to come out, or it just festers and it intensifies, and it kind of gets in that sort of loop that just goes around and around and around. I know, on your podcast and in your work, you talk a lot about beliefs. Those negative beliefs, if they don't have any way of getting out and being externalized, just tend to cycle around and around and around in the head and keep you up all night and interrupt your sleep and interrupt your self-esteem and get in the way and become, whereas when they come out, then you can get some perspective. You can see them for what they are. It's like, oh, that's what I feel. Whether it's in a piece of music, or it's something that you write, or it's a painting, or it's a dance where you just let it all hang out, like Kevin Bacon did in Footloose in that wonderful scene, in whatever form, just taking what's inside and getting it outside of yourself, literally activates the parts of the brain that aren't accessible in other ways, to get it out there so that you can objectively see what it is that you're feeling. I think that's one of the things. I think certainly taking in art, whether it be, again, music or visual art or whatever, can build a sense of empathy, like I'm not alone. Like I remember during another sort of tough period of my life, I think I was kind of adjusting to children arriving and not being able to be as free as I had been to do music and theater and other things that I'd been as free to do. And just, some conflicts, mild conflicts that came up in my marriage, but they were hurtful and different things. And I happened to be, driving somewhere, and just Gloria Estefan's song came on the radio. coming out of the dark.
Mm.
Gloria
Yeah.
had just been through this horrific car accident that, for all practical purposes, immobilized her, crippled her body.
Right,
Nobody
I
thought
remember
that
that,
girl
yeah.
was ever going to dance or sing again, you know. And she was a superstar.
For sure.
She came back ultimately even more of a superstar. But I'll never forget the experience of having that woman's voice come through those airwaves. You know, why be afraid if I'm not alone? Life is never easy. The rest is unknown. Coming out of the dark, you know. And then
Wow.
as she described her experience through music of coming out of the dark, I just wept. And it literally felt like it was a vehicle for me to come out of the dark, to sort of join her in this rejoicing of, man, this has been tough, and this has been terrible, and it's been a really hard time. But man, we're getting through it. And then, you know, later with some of her other songs, get on your feet, you know, and different things like that. Just get up and make it happen, you know, and different stuff like that. It was just like, go Gloria and go Carrie with her, you know. It's just like, you know, I think that can be such a powerful thing to say, yeah, me too.
Yeah.
In a really powerful way, you know.
Wow.
The downside, of course, is music and the arts can be just as powerful for negative. You know, because when we listen
that's a
to
good
depressive music, when we listen to angry music, when we listen to sex-charged music, yeah, me too, you know, in ways that can bring us even farther down. So I think it's super important, you know, in a time when we have so much access to all of the arts through our technologies. I mean, instantaneously, 24 hours a day, we can be feeding our minds, our bodies, our bloodstream, our cells of our bodies, you know, a constant flow of music, you know, and that can work for us, as I just described, or can work deeply against us.
Yeah.
You know, there's so much of music and the other arts that I think, you know, are so expressive of anger and depression and fear and hopelessness that literally ends up acting as a direct infusion into our spiritual bloodstream, you know, even if we don't listen to the words,
Sure.
you know,
Right. Yeah.
but those messages incorporate themselves. So I think it's very, very important in a time when we do have constant access, you know, to music and others of the arts, that we make really, really wise choices about what to expose ourselves to. Because again, on one hand, it can be so uplifting and so powerful for good.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, it can be so destructive and powerful for bringing us even farther down and intensifying our problems even more.
Wow, very well said. And folks, I told you she's passionate about music, and you felt a little bit of her passion right there. I love that. Well, there's so much to talk about, but I want to get into your book that you just wrote, your Happiness Toolkit, 16 strategies for overcoming depression and building a joyful, fulfilling life. Yeah. Tell us about why did you write the book, and who's it for, and just kind of give us a kind of a lay of the land there.
Yeah. Well, I wrote the book for a lot of reasons. I mean, in many ways, I've been writing this book for at least the last 30 or 40 years, you know, because that experience that I had in college was not the first and certainly was not the last time that I personally struggled with some depressive feelings. It kind of runs on both sides of my family. It does run on both sides of my family in some, you know, very powerful ways. And just in the process of, you know, for myself, trying to find what helps rather than what hurts. And then later, certainly, as I became a counselor and was exposed to a lot of different ideas and strategies for how to, you know, hopefully assist people that were struggling with those issues. Over the years, over the decades, really, the 30 plus years I've been a counselor, plus more years, you know, myself trying to make my way through.
Right.
I found that there are simply ideas and strategies that can help a tremendous amount, that can actually help people to heal and move forward and, you know, repair and rebuild and sometimes for the first time build happy, productive lives. There are other ideas and strategies and approaches, in my experience, that do exactly the opposite. And sadly, it's those ideas that do the opposite that get the most press, because very simply, they have the most money behind them.
Yeah.
You know. Nobody gets rich from telling somebody to exercise more or to keep a gratitude journal or to serve more or to you know, use the arts more. No, nobody gets rich from that. Yeah. But people are, you know, earning billions and billions of dollars, trillions really, on some of the other strategies that cost a lot more and in all honesty keep people a whole lot more stuck. Yeah. You know. And so part of the big reason for writing the book was because after kind of whittling it down to what actually helps, what helped me when I was struggling, as I've been through the various difficult situations in my life, what was it actually that got me through that, got me beyond that, that helped me restore my happiness? And what is it as a counselor that I've been able to use, end up being the same strategies that have helped others, versus clarifying those from things that bring people down rather than up, So like I say, in some ways I've been writing the book for 30 plus years.
For sure, yeah.
But the immediate trigger for writing the book when I started 2 years ago was a close call that one of my children had with a very, very deep struggle in the midst of a really adverse circumstance. And he was away from home at the time and was literally told by some of the professionals that worked with him at the time, I'm so very sorry. This means that you have a chemical imbalance, which you probably always had and you probably always will have. And you just need to manage it with our product, And I will never forget when he called me from Guatemala, and he said, Mom, I'm broken. I'm a sick sheep and I need to come home. And I'm like, who is this? This is a kid who was a straight A student, ran his own YouTube channel since he was 13 years old.
Yeah.
Always, a happy, productive, there were absolutely no signs at all. And so, because the implication was not only you have this disease now, but you've probably always had it and you should send us a thank you card for identifying this disorder, which we've now identified so you can get the proper help. Well, they wanted to put him on medication,
Mm-hmm.
And between us, we decided that was not going to happen. So instead, he came home, and we kind of did a crash course. I was actually teaching at the time. Every year, I teach at BYU this course on depression. So he came.
Right.
It just so happened that he was able to come home.
Happened to be there. That's
literally that
good
same
timing,
week.
right? Yeah.
So he was exposed to Mom's whole week-long program on strategies to help recover from depression, and of course, we talked a lot, just one-on-one in the midst of all that.
Yeah.
And I kid you not, as I got more clear helping him, defining these particular strategies, within 2 weeks, he was completely symptom-free. He had no symptoms of the depression that very accurately they diagnosed out there at all. And now he's the one that's heading out to college, this coming week. He's doing beautifully.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, others that I've seen who believed that message, the fact you struggle today means that you have this underlying brain disease and you just need to accept the fact that you're going to struggle with this for the rest of your life. I've seen those kids, those people of whatever age or gender, flounder even more, get
like
even more despondent. It is a life sentence,
right?
And it gets even more serious than that. For some, it's a life sentence. People are like, I don't want to live with this the rest of my life, so why stick around?
Yeah.
Sadly, I've seen that diagnosis, that belief that they're broken for life.
Yeah, that belief.
Literally, trigger depressive, even suicidal feelings, and sadly, sometimes even that action, as opposed to the idea that there are very real, understandable reasons why you're struggling today because of the situations you've been through, because of the hard things that you have experienced and that you are experiencing, and so to first extend understanding and compassion for those things, and then to look, the second part of my system is to look at, again, piggybacking on what you do, the beliefs, the thought patterns, the attitudes. What does the fact that you went through this hard thing mean to you?
Right.
Because whatever we think, like again, with this particular idea, if I think that the fact that, let's say going back to those hard episodes I had in my theater program, I didn't get such and such a role that I thought I was going to get. I wasn't as good as the other girls and getting this opportunity. There was disappointment. So, it was devastating to me at the time, but it was a temporary situation. And at that point I dealt with it again through exercise, through diet, through talking to people, through music, all that kind of stuff, got myself through. And then there was another opportunity. Whereas I wonder sometimes if Carrie Wrigley, I was Carrie Maxwell back then, would have been told at that state, the fact that you're, struggling with being able to sleep and the fact that, you don't have very much energy means that your brain is broken and, you're chemically imbalanced. And the only thing that you can do is start taking our product and being on the rest of your life. I wouldn't be doing this today. Yeah. In all honesty, I don't know if I'd be here today.
Sure.
So how we think about our struggles is even more important than what our struggles actually are. Yeah. And so essentially I wrote this book to help people who struggle. And it might be on a full-on, major depression level. It might be people who struggle with anxiety or addiction or marriage problems or other things. Because what I find is what helps with emotional problems helps across the board. And what makes things worse across the board. So if you know what brings you up, what sends you on an upward spiral of emotional wellness, and distinguish that from what takes you down, then you can apply it certainly to depression, but some of those other things too.
Yeah.
And so having to go through that very intense 2-week experience with my child,
right,
sort of codified. It was like, we did this and this and this and this, and within this period of time, it had this impact. And it just sort of forced me to pull together all those strands that I kind of quietly discovered over the course of my own 30, 40 years as an individual and as a counselor.
Yeah.
And we kind of put it all together for him. And then I'm like, wow, this could help more than just him.
Yeah.
And I end up writing that book in a month and a half.
Wow.
And it's a long book. I mean, this thing is
she's got a copy right here in front of us. It's a thick book.
Yeah. It's about 437 pages. Yeah. When I first wrote it, my manuscript was 150 pages. But when you turn it into a book, they put a bunch of space in, make it all pretty and stuff like that. So it's not as scary as it sounds. But the point is, I wrote it in a very short time because I'd been building it for a long time and just writing down the words.
Well, you've almost
easy.
been living it, like you said, for 30 plus years.
Yeah.
And then obviously dealing it with your own family and things like that. And also being a counselor to, thousands of clients over the years as well, right?
Yeah. I've verbalized these things thousands of times over the years. So just putting on paper.
Just finally got it on paper. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, how would someone find your book if they want to get a copy of it, and what would be the best place for them to do that?
Certainly easiest place is Amazon, amazon.com. It's available both as a print book, as an audio book, and most recently as a print book, an ebook, and most recently as an audio book.
Nice.
And some of my clients have told me they really like getting the audio and then just having the print book that they can sort of mark things that they like or whatever. So, but different people learn in different ways. That's why I made it available in all three of those forms.
For sure.
So Amazon is the easiest, but certainly it's also available at Barnes and Noble and several other places. You can easily Google it, but Amazon is usually the easiest for most people.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, let's jump ahead just a little bit here. So what got you into actually wanting to be a counselor? I mean, what was it that, obviously it started when you were 12, you're counseling your parents almost, trying to help them decipher what was the problem in their marriage in that moment. Mm-hmm. But what made you decide, okay, I want to do this for a living and I want to be a person that's helping people?
Yeah. Well, in ways it started when I was 12. In other ways it started when I was 7.5. Because we moved away briefly as a family from Utah to a place in Illinois, Nauvoo, Illinois, where my dad was asked to help with the development of an architectural project for our church. And in some ways, it was a magnificent opportunity, and it's turned into this beautiful Nauvoo restoration project. But when we got there, the place was a living hell. It literally was. Really? It was a ghost town. And I say that not lightly. We literally felt like there were, really dark spiritual influences that were fighting against our family the whole time. Bugs. I had a terror of bugs as a little girl. And that's really when my parents started fighting really bad, and I really started having to sort of take over and sort of be the second mom and, comforting my siblings and comforting myself. And so I'd go home. It sort of felt like the war zone. And I'd go to school, and I was basically bullied and excluded for being that, that weird Mormon girl,
Right.
And so I started, I think at that point, really to struggle a lot emotionally and just to try to, be strong, all that kind of stuff, but trying to, at the same time, to help my little brothers and sisters and help my parents the best that I could. And so that passion to help, to make a difference, and even to find a way through my own pain, I think started that early. Okay. Yeah. And then it was added upon, when I got into junior high and, the conflict expanded and, parents and stuff like that. But really the decision, well, I guess one other thing, when I got into high school, I was just a kid that people liked to talk to. I was a good listener, I guess, Yeah. And I remember writing one time in my journal as a senior in high school, I was deep into theater then. Theater was kind of my life. But I knew that was a difficult profession to, make work as a solid foundation or whatever. And so I was just kind of thinking about what do I need to do as a life career or whatever. And just the phrase came out of my writing as a senior in high school. I'm a person who turns human straw into gold.
Interesting.
And I'm like, What the crap does that mean? You know, how is that even a thing? I mean, because I did that with people. People would be struggling, and I would help turn it into something positive. That's just kind of what I natively did from the time I was a little girl in my own life and in the lives of others. But how do you actually turn that into a career? You know? And so I did end up going to school, as you mentioned, you know, finished my theater degree, and then, you know, did some service for my church and stuff, and came back thinking, you know, it was still the early 80s, you know, thought I would just come home and marry some nice boy and that would be my life, you know. But started to have a series of experiences that convinced me that I needed to get some more education. And as I was thinking about that and pondering that, I thought about that phrase, you know, from my journal as a senior in high school. I'm a person who turns humans straw into gold. Well, how would I do that? By that time, I had been exposed to a few more things. And I just had a feeling deep in my heart that just said, look into being a counselor. What the heck? You know, you're a musician. Yeah, you're an actress. But, you know, look into this too. I'm like, well, that seems really weird. But I put in my application, and it's turned out that this beautiful, like, mixture in my life, you know, being a counselor has sort of given steadiness and resilience and intention and purpose to everything else that I do, you know. And certainly in my counseling, I get exposed to all kinds of human pains and problems that then I can write about as a musician or represent in my acting or in my writing or different things like that. So it's been a lovely way of, you know, and then the artistic things sort of buoy me up and keep me happy and resilient so I can go back to the harder work, working with deeper problems and stuff like that. But ultimately, in everything that I do, and it ultimately boils down to the same mission underneath it all, you know, building happiness, extending hope, you know, whether it's through music, whether it's on stage or on screen, whether it's in my counseling office, whether it's through speaking. We live in times, obviously, when happiness and hope are becoming harder and harder to find, you know, the world is a complex and difficult place, you know, but making resources available so that people can build for themselves and for their loved ones those two crucial resources, happiness and hope, is basically the foundation underneath everything that I do, not just counseling and writing the book, but everything.
Sure. Wow. Very beautifully said. That'd be a great title for your next book, Turning Human Straw into Gold.
Oh, I do like that.
There you go. That could be
Thank you.
I like that. That's really powerful. You know, if there's someone right now that's listening to your story and, you know, and they've heard why you wrote this book and they're struggling right now with depression or anxiety or anything for that matter, you know, just feeling lonely, being stuck in, you know, because of this pandemic that we're dealing with, and and maybe even feeling a little hopeless.
Yeah.
What advice could you give them right now that would be helpful for them to hear at this time?
I think one of the things is to recognize that no matter how bad it gets, no matter how lonely any of us feel, we're not alone. Mm-hmm. I mean, we hear it constantly on the airwaves, and even it's posted in the grocery store. We're all in this together. And we are, you know. Yeah. I think one of the things that's so crucial for all of us is to recognize that, you know, though we're in a situation right now where we're required to do some social distancing, and we require, you know, that doesn't mean that we need to go into our own little private place of pain and just live there all the time. Yeah. You know, I wrote a song a number of years ago for a struggling family member that was called Love's Umbrella. You know, when the sky turns dark and the wind blows cold, when the rain begins to fall and thunder starts to roll, when the clouds collide and storms break free, sometimes I cynically suppose it only rains on me. But I'm not alone. Wow. There are others who are standing on the street where it is raining too. I can cry alone, or I can find a way to lift up love's umbrella on this rainy day. Wow. Finding ways to lift up love's umbrella. It might just be going on a walk, either alone or with your dog, and smiling at people when you're on the street. Yeah. Everybody needs a smile.
For sure.
You know, it might be, you know, going on social media and actually putting something positive there. You know, finding some inspiring quote, you know, giving some sort of message of encouragement. Yeah. It might be, you know, volunteering service for some little old lady in your neighborhood that you know, coming up here needs her leaves raked, or that needs snow removed, or, you know, just finding ways. It's so normal. It's so normal when we hurt, and we all hurt. Mm-hmm. It's so normal when we hurt to just go deep inside and focus on our own pain. But when we do, our pain increases.
Yeah.
When we do, our resilience goes down. When we do, we're more vulnerable to depression, anxiety, and especially addiction.
Yeah.
Because pain, pain is always the trigger in my experience for every kind of addiction.
Yeah.
It's like, I hurt. What can I do
want
for just a
relief.
minute to make my pain go away?
Exactly.
And so people invest in, engage in whatever their addiction of choice is. And then they feel even worse,
Yeah.
And so the temptation, the very real temptation, just make pain go away for a little while, ultimately makes it bigger and stronger. And instead, to redirect all of that to things that can actually help,
Right.
In my book, I identify the 16 strategies,
Yeah.
The one we've just been talking about, service, is one of those, But that's one of many. Writing,
Yeah.
like I mentioned before,
Getting
it
it out on paper, get it out.
Yeah, it literally activates completely different circuits of the brain to have something that comes out on paper. You literally cannot write, because it involves forming words and symbols, right? You literally can't do it without activating the neural cortex, which is the logical part of the brain,
Right.
which gets it out of the purely unconscious emotional part of the brain, where otherwise things can roll around hour after hour after hour,
Right. Yeah.
So getting it out on paper or on the keyboard or on, a sketchbook or, in some form, getting it out of yourself onto somewhere else, and then extending what you learn and just in simple ways reaching out to other people. Those are two things.
Yeah.
On my
Love
website, carriewrigley.com, I have a number of other resources that because not everybody feels ready to dive into a long book, has been my experience.
Sure.
The good news about this book, it is the comprehensive guidebook to managing depression and other disorders. The bad part of the book is it is a comprehensive guide. It's long,
Yeah, right.
and not everybody's ready to start with a long book. And so for that reason, I put resources on my site
good.
that are like the 5 steps. It's like 3 pages, the 5 steps to
Right.
start, feeling better,
Okay, great.
that kind of stuff.
No, that's good. Very well said. Again, I think sometimes we hear that service word, and I think we're kind of desensitized to it. Like, oh, yeah, service. I got to help someone. I'll feel better. But it really is one of the best things we can do when we are really turning inward. Like you said, our resilience goes down, and depression, anxiety increase, that kind of thing.
Right.
And service is a powerful thing. I really believe when we give it away, or in other words, we give out a helping hand to someone, what it does for us, it's magical.
Yeah, it really does.
But I think we hear that word sometimes. Oh yeah, service, and people, it goes in one ear out the other. And maybe I'm speaking for myself here,
Yeah.
but I have to remind myself how important that is, especially when I am struggling. It's like, you know what, get out of myself just for a minute here, and maybe I can go help the neighbor, or maybe I can, post something positive, or I can give someone a phone call, that kind of thing. And I think that goes a long way.
Or I can just simply pitch in the home that I'm living in.
Exactly.
I can clean the bathroom without being asked. I can make my bed without my mom bugging me 14 times.
It doesn't have to be big.
I can say something kind to my child on their way to school. I
Yeah.
can leave a nice note in my husband's lunch or whatever. There's our opportunities for extending kindness to others are constant.
Right.
Even with strangers, even if we're living alone, I always tell my clients that live alone that I think are feeling the impact of this more than anybody else. Don't stay in your house alone all the time.
Yeah.
Find reasons, and it's easier now than it will be in a few months. I think it's crucial right now to build those habits.
When it gets cold and snowy and all that stuff. Yeah.
To find reasons to take a walk in the park, or to go to the mall, or to go yet again to the grocery store, even if it's to buy one thing, just so you can see other human beings, and so you can have opportunity to smile at them and have some kind of interaction with them.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, so if someone wanted to reach out to you to learn more about you, obviously you mentioned your website, we'll mention it again, but what's the best way for someone that maybe has a question for you or wants to get some of your materials, and even maybe, I don't know if you have a website for just your music or that kind of thing.
Yeah,
but
I
what's
do.
The best way for
I
people
have
to reach
lots
out
of
to you?
websites,
Okay.
several for my music. The main one for that is Morning Light Music, but my music is also available on Spotify, on YouTube,
Right.
on iTunes.
Okay.
So I'm pretty easy to find that way.
Awesome.
But yeah, Morning Light Music is my main music site. Really, the easiest way to get to all my sites is from my main site, carriewrigley.com.
carriewrigley.com. Okay.
Because I have connections from the homepage of that site to all my other ones.
Okay.
But, if people want to come in for counseling, for example, I have a site called morninglightcounseling.com that, again, is accessible from Carrie Wrigley, but where you can just go to it directly. And then another one I like to direct people to is called counselinglibrary.org. And that's where I have a lot of the articles, videos, podcast episodes, just different things I've been involved in creating for a number of years. I created originally as a resource for my clients. So handouts, lots of handouts, So it's a great place to go for information, about healing from depression, about improving relationships, about increasing wellness. And it's basically an online resource library, counselinglibrary.org.
Right. Okay.
But like I say, all of those are accessible from the doorway of carriewrigley.com.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and you really do have a lot of stuff that people can delve into that will be really beneficial. I mean, again, you're so well versed in so many different things and so talented in so many different areas, and you're very passionate about what you do. And I think that's why you're so good at what you do, because there's passion behind it. And I think people who know you feel that.
Yeah.
And I've seen that for, like I said, we've known each other for so long. I've seen it year in, year out, and that kind of thing. So it's really fun to watch. Yeah, and I'm really excited for everything that you're doing and your success. And any lasting words or any challenge you could give our listeners at this point that you would want to leave us with?
I would say, again, no matter how hard it gets from day to day, to remember that there is hope. And that hope begins with one tiny little action. And it might be a different action every day. Maybe on day one, it'll be writing out a gratitude journal, just thinking about, out of everything that's hard, what are a few things that are happy about my life? Maybe today the sky is blue. Maybe today my hair flipped the right direction.
Right.
Maybe today my 2-year-old said something funny.
Right.
Maybe today, I got notified of an opportunity that will be important for me in some way.
Yeah.
It can be the slightest little things. So maybe the gratitude journal is today, and maybe tomorrow I decide to go on a walk or do something physical, and maybe the next day, I do something kind for somebody, and maybe the next day I do some kind of art project or music project or something else to sort of let feelings out.
Okay.
The beauty of what I found with that I've put into the book is there's so many different things that can help,
Yeah.
And sometimes people will say to me, I've tried everything. And ultimately what I found they really mean by that is they have tried every medication on me and nothing is, quote, working.
Yeah.
And what I find almost always with those people is they've never been exposed to these very simple but very powerful ideas.
Right.
These ideas aren't ones you'll find in the pamphlets at the doctor's office or on the commercials on TV.
Sure.
But they're things, they're mostly free, that people can start doing right away, And so to do some little thing, I found a really good starting exercise is what I call the wellness grid. And that is basically to just divide a paper into 4 sections and to title those sections mental, physical, spiritual, and social. And write down maybe 3, maybe 5 ideas in each of those areas that over time you can do. I find that organize it into those 4 areas makes it easier to think of. Mental, I could read the self-help book. I could make a plan for my goals. I could, do a gratitude journal. Physical, I could go on a walk. I can learn to cook healthier. I can, clean up my house. Whatever, identifying ideas in each of those 4 so you kind of have a menu to draw from day to day. I find that doing that wellness grid, as simple as it is, people can usually do it in 5 to 10 minutes.
Sure,
and it's one of the ideas that comes up very early in my book. But people don't need the book just to do that simple of an exercise.
Simple little
and then
activity.
once you have that menu, then you just pick 1 or 2 or 3 things from that menu every day to start doing. Rather than what we tend to do instead when we hurt, which is ruminate, just go deep in ourselves and think around, go around and around and around the same depressing or anxiety producing or angry thoughts, but to actually get involved in some kind of positive action every day,
Awesome. Yeah, that's great advice. I love that. And I love how simple it really is.
It really is.
So simple. Well, Carrie, I can't thank you enough for spending some time with us today and sharing, a portion of your life and what you're doing and how you're helping so many people. I want to thank you for sharing that with us today.
Thanks, Todd. It's been great being here.
Yeah, awesome. Well, there you go, guys. Go again. I told you, another amazing guest, Carrie Wrigley. Please check her out on her website, carriewrigley.com, and that will lead you to everything else. If you have a question for her, you can reach out to her there as well. You can also reach out to me, and I can relay the messages to her as well. I live really close to her. But yeah, I'm so grateful, man. This was awesome. Thank you so much. The time just flew by.
Yeah.
And so there you go, listeners. Please share this with people that you know. And I can't thank you enough for supporting me and this wonderful Belief Cast. It's just been amazing. And we're going to keep bringing in amazing guests. And we couldn't do it without you. So thank you so much. And until next time.